Embattled but defiant, Macedonia's Prime Minister refuses to step down despite angry protests by the opposition. It all started over alleged wiretap disclosures. But is that the only reason, or are other issues involved? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mike Hanna. It's a dramatic display of ethnic unity for a country whose recent history was ripped apart by division. Macedonians of all stripes have taken to the streets in their tens of thousands to demand the resignation of Prime Minister Nikola Gruevski and his government. It follows a wiretapping scandal which government critics say casts doubts on the state of democracy in Macedonia, and which the opposition says reveals government attempts to control journalists, judges, political opponents and more. Lots to discuss with our guest today, but first Al Jazeera's Robin Forestier-Walker helps set things up from the Macedonian capital, Skopje.
This is the building where Prime Minister Nikola Gruevski does his business, and this is where the opposition have decided to camp out, opposed to his rule, to his government, and they say they won't leave until he does. Now, it looks like an internal affair between the government and Macedonians that have been scandalized by leaked recordings of phone conversations that reveal corruption at the highest level of government, including the Prime Minister, ranging from vote rigging to million-dollar kickbacks, even the cover-up of a murder. But the international community is watching very closely. There have been violent incidents in recent weeks between security forces and alleged Albanian separatists, and there was a conflict here in 2001 between Albanians and Macedonians that almost brought this country to the brink of civil war. A peace deal was reached. Any instability now could undermine that peace deal and escalate into a wider regional conflict. But for now, at least, protesters are saying they're united, Macedonians and Albanians together, against this government and against this political system. This is Robin Forestier-Walker for Inside Story.
Oh, the crisis unfolding over these leaks is endangering the 9-year rule of Prime Minister Nikola Gruevski. He says the recordings were made by a foreign intelligence service trying to bring down his government. They were leaked by this man, opposition leader Zoran Zaev. He says the recordings were given to him by a whistleblower and were part of a mass surveillance operation targeting thousands of government opponents and allies. Well, let me introduce you to our guests. In Skopje, Vladimir Bozhinovski, assistant professor in political science at the University of Skopje, and in Moscow, Pavel Felgenhauer, columnist for the Novaya Gazetta newspaper and specialist on Russia's foreign policy. Welcome to you both. Let's begin with Vladimir Bozhinovski. We know that claims about wiretapping are the immediate cause, but to what extent are these demonstrations a culmination of long-standing attempts by the opposition to topple the government?
Okay, we have a lot of attempts in the past also by the opposition in order to try to become part of the government as a technical government. You're aware that in 2013 we have also some sort of demonstration. Also in 2011, again, we have some sort of demonstration. In 2012, by the end of 2012, the opposition also left the parliament. So this is not new, although now it's probably more serious since the audio tapes which the opposition leader Zoran Zaev plays into public in the last 3 or 4 months.
Well, Pavel Felgenhauer, let's get right to the point. What regional implications does what is essentially a domestic political dispute have?
From the point of view of Moscow, this is another covert revolution, kind of organized by the United States and by its NATO allies and aimed primarily against vital Russian strategic interests. Though Macedonia is a small, landlocked, impoverished Balkan nation, seemingly in the middle of nowhere. Today, for Russia, its strategic significance is very high, and primarily because of this new gas pipeline that Russia wants to move through Turkey, through Greece, and through Macedonia and Serbia, and then Hungary into Europe to bypass Ukraine. And since this is seen in the context also of the Ukrainian crisis and Ukrainian colored revolutions as another part of the West starts trying to surround and push Russia out of Europe.
Well, we're going to return to that pipeline issue in a little while, but let me introduce now Nazim Rashidi, political analyst and columnist from Skopje. He's also a media and policy advisor. Welcome to you, Nazim. The question I'd like to put to you, we've heard the claim and the counterclaim, but is the popular view that the opposition is correct in asserting that these tapes are indeed genuine?
I didn't quite get well the question, but as far as the situation and how the developments here are going, what I can say for the moment is that a new momentum is the reality in Macedonia. The one aspect is the fact that we see anti-government protest with Macedonian and Albanian together, something that it's new and something that we didn't see before. And on the other side, we have the situation presented by the government and by the protest that it should be today, later on in the day, where a lot of people are expected to give support to the government. In this situation, again, what is new is the fact that inter-ethnic clash, let's say, it's not present, but it's rather more political clash in Macedonia, and this is something where a lot of people are expecting to see in what direction the country will go and how the political crisis it will be resolved.
Vladimir Bozhinovski, that point about the demonstrators not being separated on any kind of ethnic line, this is at one time an encouragement to the country as a whole, perhaps, but also a greater threat to the government, is it not?
No, because the ethnic Albanians vote for the ethnic Albanians party. So since the government is changing or is winning on the election, they will vote for their respective party, DUI and DPA, and not for SDSM. So basically, this will not be a major challenge considering the ethnic Albanians as part of these protests.
And yet we are seeing, though, a major sense of unity in the demonstrations of recent days, have we not?
Yes, and this is very good for Macedonia as a country. Since I am urging in the last 10 years all major Macedonian but also ethnic Albanians party to make pre-election coalition instead of post-election coalition, and that I think will be good for democracy in Macedonia, but also for keeping the ethnic tension low or non-existent.
Well, Nazim Rashidi, I mean, that particular point that we're going on about, that it may be a threat to the government, but certainly could be good news to many Macedonians to see a degree of political unity being reached in the streets.
I think that in the future, the thing, what the situation it's bringing actually, maybe somehow I will phrase it in one line. It's a nationalistic nightmare, because we had a government which wanted nationalists to support it, especially from the Macedonian side, in order to have something to give to the people, something which in the eyes of the people it would look like they are very strong, and we don't have this moment right now. Right now everyone is seeing that they are dealing with a bad governance, but in the future, in a prospect, if we have an election, I think still people would vote in ethnic lines. Basically, probably they will vote for the political parties based on ethnic lines, but still any other new government will have to have some kind of new momentum. That means that they wouldn't have the burden of nationalism with them. And this somehow should help whoever will form the government in the future, to actually focus more freely on economics and other social aspects, which it was a burden for the country.
Well, Pavel Felgenhauer, you mentioned a short while ago Ukraine, drawing almost a parallel. Are we looking at the potential in a small country like Macedonia to have the same divisive effect across the world as did Ukraine?
Well, of course, to much lesser extent, but the possibility is there. The Russian General Staff actually officially has declared that so-called color revolutions are a major threat to Russia and to world peace in general. And here there is, of course, a very specific Russian, very serious issue. The CEO of Gazprom, Alexei Miller, has just recently, speaking in Berlin, announced that Russia wants to terminate all transit of natural gas through Ukraine. And that was the main duct of supplying Russian gas to Europe. After the present contract with Ukraine on transit ends in 2019, Russia wants to terminate. And to bypass Ukraine, Russia is building a new pipeline under the Black Sea to Turkey, and from Turkey, in Turkey is going to be a hub on the border with Greece, and from the Greek government basically agreed, the Turks seem to agree, and from there, from Greece, it should go through Macedonia, through Serbia, through Hungary, into the middle of Europe. And so Macedonia is absolutely vital, and the present prime minister and his government tacitly agreed to consider such a pipeline. The opposition may be against, and from Moscow it's seen in this big chessboard of this big strategic game, Macedonia has become a very, very important piece.
Well, let's just give some background to actually add to the understanding of what is happening here. Macedonia largely avoided the war in the Balkans surrounding the breakup of what used to be Yugoslavia. But Macedonia came dangerously close to civil war in 2001 when armed rebels began demanding greater rights for Albanians. The Albanian minority makes up roughly a quarter of Macedonia's 2.1 million population. Ethnic Macedonians and Albanians live largely separate but peaceful lives. But the opposition has accused Prime Minister Gruevski of stoking ethnic tensions to try and divert attention from the wiretapping leaks. Now, particular reference is made to the issue of an incident that occurred earlier this month when what we saw at Vukanovo, where what we saw was fighting between what the government said were ethnic Albanian fighters and security forces. Vladimir Bozhinovski, this particular incident at Vukanovo sent a warning to the country as a whole, didn't it? Reminding people of what happened way back in 2001?
Probably yes, although now it's totally different situation. I think that the most viable theory of what happens or what was the point of such armed group or terrorists to come in Macedonia and to start some attacks is that probably this group with a high criminal background tried to use the situation of the deep political crisis in Macedonia, where the main forces are towards, keeping the calm, the demonstrant and the protest, and maybe to use this situation as a fuse for a bigger conflict. However, the reaction of this action, both among Macedonians and Albanians, were really calm, and they assure us that a new crisis is not possible.
Well, Nazim Rashidi, your view of that. The government contends that what happened at Vukanovo was a question of what they saw as foreign fighters. But what's the opposition's interpretation of what happened there?
What is important maybe is that most of the people do not, or most of the people kept quiet. Let me say something to the wider audience. You explained the situation a couple of years ago in Macedonia. If something like this would have happened maybe just a couple of months before in Macedonia, there would be a more dangerous situation. Today there is nothing, and the only reason is because this incident didn't actually went in the eyes of the audience, Albanians and Macedonians, as something very, or let's say, very dangerous, but actually something orchestrated. And because of this, unfortunately, there were a lot of casualties, but only because of this people kept calm. And to my knowledge and to the knowledge of a lot of other analysts here, if this notion wouldn't be part of the people's perception, then we wouldn't be able to see so many Albanians in the anti-government rally, because in the end this rally was called and led by Macedonian opposition leader. So this situation only brings in the eye of the people that sometimes or maybe in the last couple of months or years, in their eyes, everything was manipulated only for favor or only in favor to the political parties.
Well, Pavel Felgenhauer, I want to get back to the government contention that there are foreign agents involved in what is happening in Macedonia, saying that they are intent on bringing down the government. From a regional perspective, in whose interest would it be for the government in Macedonia to be brought down? Your view?
I'm not sure that this is at least seen as a regional matter per se, from Moscow at least. This is seen as a part of the big chessboard of the big game. For Russia, this is actually an issue of Russian policy towards Europe, of keeping Europe on the kind of hook of Gazprom. And this is, very important. So from the Moscow point of view, these foreign governments are the United States and its NATO allies, and not regional players. Regional players are seen as just kind of proxies. Of course, maybe from Skopje, that will be seen much differently, but that's how it's seen from Moscow.
Pavel Felgenhauer, just to stay with you and just to expand a little bit on what you've mentioned about the various pipeline programs that Russia has launched. Now, you made very clear that Macedonia is absolutely critical to the establishment of what is now called the Turkish Stream pipeline, which replaced the previous idea for a pipeline because Bulgaria pulled out under pressure from the West, from NATO, from the European Union. The US is known to have been putting pressure to bear on Macedonia not to provide facilities for such a pipeline. We're seeing Macedonia, and perhaps connected to this political outbreak at the moment, as becoming central between yet another point of conflict between the United States and Russia. Do you see it like that?
Well, yes, from Moscow it's seen as a further attempt to contain and isolate Russia, because Gazprom has announced that they're already more or less beginning to build the pipeline, the Turkish Stream, to Turkey. And if it goes into Turkey and it doesn't go into Europe from Turkey, then it doesn't make much of that investment doesn't make much sense. And from if it goes into Greece, and from Greece it can't go up into the Balkans through Macedonia, again, that doesn't makes very little sense. Macedonia geographically and terrain makes it the ideal point to go in from Greece into Europe. And this is seen as not just business on gas, this is seen as a much more wider issue. And so the West took over Ukraine and tried to take over Ukraine through a cold revolution. Then there was a change of government in Sofia in Bulgaria, where kind of Moscow-friendly government was replaced. And now there's another Moscow-friendly government under attack. And yes, there is a feeling of being surrounded, of being attacked. That's how the Russians see it. And maybe to some extent, as right now it is, it's more like during the Cold War when everyone had to take some kind of side. And that was the main stage of any kind of conflict. On whose side are the Americans, on whose side are the Russians?
Well, Vladimir Bozhinovski, to what extent is this a larger issue of the ongoing conflict between the US and Russia? To what extent is there any perception within Macedonia that it is actually underlying what is happening in political processes at the moment?
Although this theory has some elements which is backing up, I would like to just to remind that Macedonia is EU candidate for the EU membership, and also is NATO ally. So the interest of any government in Macedonia is first towards the EU and towards the NATO. So we are not choosing between East or West. We are not choosing between East and West. We are waiting to enter NATO and to start negotiation process with the EU. However, because of the blockade of the veto by the Greek state, we are still waiting for such an event. Although I would like to remind that the theory that some government has some influence in what happens in Kumanovo is very unusual. And if I need to choose among the theory about the NATO, about the US and Russia clash over the Turkish Stream, and this theory that our government has something to do in Kumanovo, I will choose this fight between US and Moscow. But as I mentioned before, I think that the most viable theory is that because of the protests, some groups from Kosovo try maybe to use this situation in Macedonia and to make some crisis on higher level. However, thanks to the last 14 years of implementation of Ohrid Framework Agreement, I think that the Macedonian citizens, both Macedonians and Albanians, are not anymore ready for a clash or some civil war.
Nazim Rashidi, your view about the contention that Macedonia is somehow involved in a far wider conflict between the US and Russia. Do you see any merit in that particular argument?
I think that in that sense, the Macedonian government maybe uses this element in order to benefit on some issues. First of all, is it true that Macedonia was blocked in integration, EU and NATO integration, because of the name issue with Greece? And this can be another form of pressure if we want to believe in some kind of conspiracy. On the other hand, what is more practical in my view is the fact that the government is still trying to cope with economical and social crisis, and since there is a wider criticism how the government is operating in some issues, and especially the government cannot anymore find financial support from Western countries, it somehow tries to find some other support, economical support from other countries, and in this sense it would be Russia. So this can be one of the reasons why Macedonia can be seen that it's between these two superpowers. On the other hand, in Macedonia there would be a quite wider division if the Macedonia decides to lean, let's say, towards Russia and Moscow. And Macedonian and Albanians, not only Albanians, will be against this theory, because as it was said just before, Macedonia is a candidacy member of EU. It is a major political discussion here, and not only discussion, but it's major political political request by the people, so Macedonia as fast as it can to be part of the EU, and again it's let's say technically part of the NATO because it is part of some NATO organization even though it's not a member yet. So in this context I don't think that any government would encourage this kind of situation where the society will be even more divided. But yet the government tries to play it, as I said before, in their benefit, but and on the other hand, to benefit economically if it's possible.
Well, it's a story with many moving parts, but my thanks to our guests, Vladimir Bozhinovski, Pavel Felgenhauer, and Nazim Rashidi. And thank you for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. We'd love to hear your thoughts. You can get in touch with us on our program page at aljazeera.com. You can also post your comments at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story or tweet us at AJ Inside Story. From me, Mike Hanna, and the whole team here, thank you for watching and goodbye for now.